Your policy or your resolution that was passed in January directed the superintendent to provide that input and to engage in an extensive community feedback process. Both of those things have happened. Superintendent stood right here in this room and said, I have no suggested changes to your policy. And the feedback that came back didn't highlight any lines in the policy that are problematic or concerning. It's all about implementation. And if we had tackled the policy language at any point along this path, we would be in a different place, but that isn't what happened. What happened is that we as a board told our community over and over and over and over again that we are going to engage in this process. Director Peterson's exact language the night that the individual excellence resolution was passed was, help us help you, point out any gaps and what might be creating implementation barriers for you. Director Winiger mirrored very similar language. We have heard from both our community and our superintendent that there are no implementation barriers that they can easily and readily point out in this policy. And based on the assurance that we gave our community that we were going to follow this process, we can't change course at this point. If we change course at this point, we are creating a lot of mistrust within our community, and we have bigger issues that require trust to take care of down the road. And you're right, I wish that this had been handled differently many, many steps along the way, but it feels to me, and I can't be the only one who's sitting here watching this, that you created a process with the hope of ending at an end result. And when that end result didn't come out to be the way you had hoped it would be, now you're changing the direction of how this whole process is going to work. That doesn't feel good to me, and it won't feel good to our community.
Let's avoid ascribing intent to other directors per Robert's rules and our decorum. Director Myers, just before you do, let's make sure you obtain the floor before we just open up to general conversation. So before I go back, I'll go to other directors and we can come back. But I'd like to address Director Hansen's concerns around the process that we theoretically set in motion. I'm reading directly from the resolution now that you referred to. It says, now therefore be it resolved. And I'll skip ahead. Board of Education directs the superintendent to recommend potential changes to policy ADB and related implementation consistent with the principles set above. And then it goes on to talk about mission bins. We had a superintendent say, I have no specific recommendations. She did say also that I suggest the board consider the stakeholder and focus group input when considering ADB. That is exactly what we're doing. This did not direct the superintendent to rewrite policy ADB. That would be completely inappropriate. This is, as we said, a board policy. This is not a special magical policy that we can't touch or amend. We have amended a ton of policies, and whether the resolution wound up with the superintendent directing specific, general, or just, hey, look at the feedback you got from stakeholder groups and focus groups and the survey. It is ultimately up to this board at any point to decide to amend, improve, rescind, replace, or dispose of any policy that we see fit. That is the proper function of this board. With that, I'll go to Director Meek, who raised her hand. Director, before I do, just to clarify, an aye vote would be to agree to reaffirm the policy as amended, and by intention, that is probably means to disregard any proposed changes or things. So an aye vote would be to reaffirm the current policy as written with no changes, but for the one amended statement that Director Hansen had. And with that, I will take the roll. Director Hansen?
I'm going to vote aye, but while you are each making your decision about how you're going to vote, I would just encourage you to really think back to the comments that you have made multiple times that are recorded, that anyone can go back and watch. You were very committed to this process, and changing the process right now would really create a problem within our community, and it creates a problem for me. So my vote is aye.
Director Meek?
Aye.
Director Myers.
No.
Director Peterson, no. Director Ray is not here. Director Williams.
No.
Director Weiniger.
No.
The motion is not passed by a vote of 3-3. Any other comments regarding this? I'll make a comment to Director Hansen's suggestion. I don't believe that the quote process that was set in motion was not fulfilled. We did get recommendations from Superintendent Kane, which was, I have no specific recommendations, but please look at the policy, or not the policy, the survey or the feedback if you're going to consider ADB. And by that I read, if you're going to make any changes. We did also get the second part to be responsive, which is, what are you going to change in implementation? It was very clear. We spent an hour getting briefed on ADBR. And frankly, I, as one director, find absolutely no problem with ADBR. To Director Meek's assertion that we somehow paused implementation of any type of equity policy, the policy remains in place to today. Today, we have a policy ADB. It is exactly as passed back in March 2021. There was no recension of a policy. If you recall my words back in December of 2021, my initial proposition as one director was repeal and replace. That would have been a complete pausing. That would have been a complete revision, especially if it was repealed and nothing was put in its place. So I do not believe that implementation was paused. I do believe, based on our comments that we heard from multiple people at the podium tonight, we have problems in implementation to this day, whether it's bullying related to equity, whether it's around resourcing. We've heard lots of issues. So again, I will applaud the superintendent and her staff for developing and spending so many hours and weeks and months in putting together what I believe is a very, one opinion, effective step towards proper implementation. Again, it assuaged all my concerns when I voted for this resolution that we passed approximately a year ago. So I'm glad we have some clarity in implementation. Again, implementation, the how needs to tie back to the what and the why. It was very clear in our stakeholder engagement and feedback that there are problems with the language in terms of clarity and precision. Again, you don't see anything in this draft that we are looking at tonight that actually changes the policy, but for one thing that I'll get to at the end around the EAC. And the rest of it, for a starting point, remains intact with additions. So that is my stance on this, that we absolutely have the authority to go forward as a board and fulfill our duties to continuously improve our policy if it offers clarity to both our staff and the community. Director Williams.